Chase Thomas podcast. My nephew needs me to record. See, I already hate it. I hate it.
All right, hello, and welcome back to another episode of Tennessee Sports Guys with fellow Tennessee Volunteer Sports Guys, Ryan Schumpert of Rocky Top Insider. Ryan, good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well.
Oh, wow. That's
all I got for you. That's all I got for you.
That was concise. That was unbelievably concise, and something that I didn't have an alternative to. I was expecting a little bit. The man misses one Tennessee football game, gets to relax over the weekend, and he's out of his element. He's not fired up. You didn't have the energy for me yesterday in the group chat, and you're still just pretty low key right now, Ryan.
Well, this is pretty misleading that I just got to relax over the weekend. I got 4 hours of sleep over a 36-hour span covering Tennessee basketball and trying to get home on Saturday. So I'm not sure I'd go quite that far, but yeah, no, a little under the weather, a little tired, but trying to get the juice ready to match it tonight.
Oh, the juice is coming because Jack Foster is here to push back against all of my worst Tennessee Volunteer tendencies. Jack Foster of Always College Football. Jack, good evening, sir. How are you?
I'm doing well. Been a heck of a travel weekend, just like Ryan's had. So to Como, and didn't get a lot of sleep last night, but some. So ready to roll for this podcast and talk about the worst loss of the Heupel era.
Is that official? Are we claiming this is the worst loss of the Heupel era?
We have to.
Okay, make the case. Why is this the what? Ryan's going to push back on this. I'm going to see, but Jack, why is this the worst loss in the Heupel era?
I guess I should have done more research, more numbers to back it up, because I'm sure I could find some. But I know it's the lowest points.
Yep.
Total he has scored while at Tennessee. I'm pretty sure it's the largest point differential. South Carolina's 25. So,
yeah, it is.
Yes, the most points Tennessee's lost by under Josh Heupel. And yeah, the magnitude surrounding the game is not the same as South Carolina, but with the way Tennessee lost, just bad defensively on the road again, and offense couldn't move the ball. If it wasn't for the most improbable touchdown they've scored this season, they get blanked. So, and it happened to a Missouri team that, I just feel like Tennessee should have been able to beat. I don't know. I can see the argument for South Carolina, but there are a lot of other circumstances that kind of happened in that game with Hendon and, all the drama that is still, we don't know, but all that side of the story too. So I put this as the biggest loss of the Heupel era.
Well, I think it's fair to, Ryan, when you look at that with what Jack's pointing out here, is that I think the difference, and I think there's like some revisionism about what happened at South Carolina last year, where the offense was moving fine. Like the offense was shredding South Carolina, and they were in that game in the fourth quarter before Hendon went down with the torn ACL. And I understand part of it was just the defense was so bad. South Carolina wasn't slowing down Tennessee, like offensively.
No, but Tennessee was down 2 possessions.
Sure, but like things could happen because this Tennessee team can score in a hurry. You never know. Like with the Tennessee offense,
they didn't get to stop the whole game, so it's mathematically possible. They didn't get to stop the whole game, and they would have had to get one and score every possession just to get the game into overtime.
Right, but this one, you look at both sides of the ball, where it's a collective failure just about everywhere you look. Like this is one where, like Jack said, 7 points, lowest of the Heupel era. I don't think I ever thought we would see a 7-point game from the Heupel era. I didn't have that on my bingo card at all. He used the word disappointed a lot in the post-game presser. You were on the grounds, Jack. What was it like? What did it look like post-game, and just how demoralized did it kind of seem? And do you have real concerns about how this permeates over into the next 2 weeks for Tennessee's football team?
I'll answer the first part first. Certainly deflating, right? And I think you saw a lot of anger after Alabama, and it was not that way. There was hardly any anger from Heupel. I got that sense. It was just, like, as he was saying, disappointment and deflation. It was just, just lifeless, I guess is a word you could use too. He was coach speak. He was answering the questions just, by the book, but outside of that, not much to offer. And then the players, there was a healthy gap between the end of the game and when they talked to the media. So I thought they were pretty good, all things considered, and, taking accountability and all that stuff. As far as moving forward in the next couple of weeks, that's a question I don't think I can answer. I'm very curious to see what Tennessee does to bounce back from that. I mean, you have Georgia coming to your house. You can spin that as a good thing or you can spin that as a bad thing. And I think there's arguments for both. But that's probably what I'm keeping, obviously, the closest eye on heading into next week is just how they respond from something like that.
Do y'all remember what the line was for Tennessee, Georgia 2 years ago at home?
I do not.
Let's see if I can find it on ESPN, but I don't. One thing I will say on the deflation aspect of it, I thought our Rocky Top Insider, like the pin photo for Heupel's press conference was like, just had that vibe. And so he's just like, he's sitting down, which he's standing up most of the time in these post-game press conferences. And he's just, in this one, he's just sitting down, he's slumped and he's like looking down and very, very deflating. It felt like, obviously I wasn't there, but I felt like Jack did a good job of painting the picture of what he sounded like and looked like talking about it.
And I think this is kind of uncharted waters. I mean, the difference with last year was Tennessee got up. I mean, Hendon was gone and they had a reason to fight, right? Like they wanted to finish it out strong for Hendon. Hendon was obviously on the sideline for the following week. He was still with the team. He was still a heavy part. And you also could spin it as like, hey, Jeremy Banks wasn't there defensively. That happened. We'll clean that up the following week. But like, I don't know where you go to get up off the mat now because you have nothing to play for down the stretch. You have a Georgia team that just made a top 10 team in Ole Miss look like they just didn't belong in the same stratosphere as Georgia. But then on the flip side, we've seen this before with Heupel's teams at Tennessee. They can look really, really bad on the road in the SEC, and they haven't lost a home game since Georgia in 2021. So it's like it's so hard for me to balance like how much you should be panicking as a Tennessee fan down the stretch here when you consider that you're at home the rest of the way and you've been really, really good at home to this point in the Heupel tenure. And I mean, it's a difference between 8-4 and 9-3 potentially these last 2 weeks. But I mean, I don't know. I've gone back and forth on this sentiment of like how much panic and how much you should read into the disappointment. And Ryan, you talking about how he was sitting and the disappointment. I think they were just stunned to get obliterated on both sides of the ball. That to that extent, I don't think Heupel could have ever foreseen a second half like that. And I can understand where things were looking really good when Jaylen Wright before the Jaylen Wright fumble, right? Like you had some really bad luck where the offense only has 3 plays in the first quarter. You're like, what are the odds of that happening again? Like we'll be fine. We'll figure it out. That's not going to happen again. But then to just have that kind of swing and to lose the middle 8 in that way, I think was kind of stunning for Heupel to see it go that way, and then the defense not to have their head in the game and just to allow Schrader to get the team back into field goal range right before the kick, and you're just like, oh, this might be over. Like that was like one of those where you're like, we've seen how Heupel's teams have come out in the second half in the SEC on the road. They haven't been good. It's been an issue for years now. I don't know how much we can pull from it, but I understand fans who are extremely concerned about how the rest of the season goes. And I also understand the people who are like, hey, we're back at home and I've seen this team bounce back at home in a strong way. And also, if you had told anybody before the year, hey, it was 8-4 or 9-3 for this Tennessee team and a gap year with Joe Milton and company, I think most fans probably would have been okay with that, right? But then you actually see it play out and you're like, oh, this is what 8-4, 9-3 could look like sometimes, where it's just you have some really ugly losses, some second halves that should not have happened. You lose in a rough way to a bad Florida team. I don't know. It's interesting. I'm just kind of I'm still all over the place, as you can see 24 hours out.
Yeah, I think
that... Go ahead, Jack.
I was just gonna say, and this is across the sport, and I feel like you see it a lot this year, where it's hard to. College football is far from an exact science, and it's hard to make sense of a lot of trends you see. Like, hey, Oklahoma State won Bedlam, but then they get absolutely shellacked 45-3 to UCF. So much of it is hangover and teams getting up to play a team. I think Missouri was fired up to play Tennessee. Yeah. And, given what Eli Drinkwitz said directly after the game, you could tell it was a little bit personal for him yesterday. And maybe Tennessee was just a little lackadaisical. This could be a game where Tennessee really gets up, and I think that would be huge credit to Heupel if we see them play with a lot of intensity next week against Georgia. but it could also be very deflating. I could see it going one extreme to the other. I don't know which one's going to happen, but as someone who's looking at this Tennessee program and hoping it doesn't spiral completely, you at least want to see Tennessee come out with that edge of, hey, we have nothing to lose next week.
And no pressure.
Definitely.
It's not like there's just a bunch of 5-stars and big time recruits on campus this weekend.
That's just, you can't. Yeah, you just can't. I mean, I don't really think about any of that stuff when I'm.
Yeah, I don't put much stock in.
Yeah.
Recruits don't commit because teams play well in games they go to visits. I mean, I get the general momentum standpoint as a whole, but I don't think it matters that a bunch of recruits are going to be there from that standpoint. I will say, Chase, to your point, Tennessee was 19.5-point favorites 2 years ago, and they opened as 9-point favorites this season. Obviously, I think that line's already moved north of 10. But it's viewed as a much more even game, and it's one that it's what we've said all year. Like, Georgia's not, I don't know, maybe they will be, but there's a lot of things to point to Georgia not being very revved up for this game. And that plays to Tennessee's advantage. I think Brock Bowers being back puts a lot of, I don't know, what the word I'm looking for is, but it's kind of a muzzle on the optimism of Tennessee truly being able to pull off the upset. But Georgia's killed 2 straight teams. I mean, Tennessee was so lifeless yesterday. Like, Kirby Smart shouldn't even show his team the Missouri-Tennessee game tape. Like, that's not what he should do this week. So I'm with you. I think I could be going in 2 radical directions. And I think to the point you said, like, most fans would have been fine with 8-4, 9-3. I think most fans would have been okay with 9-3, and I think 8-4 lesser. And that's why I think this game, you say this game doesn't mean anything, or they're not playing for anything. And I get what you're saying. They're eliminated in the East, and I know the Tennessee players don't think this way, but man, they haven't been playing for anything since they lost in Gainesville. I mean, the season achieving anything was over from that point, from a championship, winning the East perspective. And I know the players don't think about it like that until it's really dead. But I think there is certainly a path to Heupel being able to get his team fired up and buying into Georgia. I mean, they haven't lost in 27 games. They're the best program. I know they might not be number 1 in the country, but they're the best program, and I think they're still the best team in the country. So I definitely agree that it could go very dramatically one way or the other. I'm just not sure I'm completely buying Tennessee's players are just, they don't have anything to play for now because they can't win the East. Well, they didn't have a chance to win the East in any realistic sense after they lost that Florida game.
I'm maybe most nervous just the injuries. Like Dante Thornton, I don't know what the update is there, but he finally breaks through and has a big touchdown, one of the best touchdown catches. I mean, him and Squirrel, both unbelievable touchdown catches this year for Tennessee. I mean, you're really, really thin now at wide receiver, and obviously the strength with Georgia this year is not their front 7. It's been their back end with Lassiter, with Starks, and those guys where you have a very inexperienced group now out wide, and I think they're going to have a lot of trouble separating and really creating any kind of havoc on the perimeter against Georgia, even at home. And we saw, the Jaylen Wright does he bounce back? Like, I worry about that. I mean, the fumbles, he hasn't had that issue in a while, but I mean, he was definitely not himself after the fumble, and then really wasn't used in the second half going from there. So is he able to get back into good graces? Like, is there concern there? Because then you're just in dire straits against Georgia. If Jalen's not able to shake off Como and bounce back, and this team's not able to trust themselves to run the football even at home, I don't know. Then you're really looking at a dark scenario at home.
Yeah, I do think Georgia's rush defense is gettable. I don't know any numbers off the top of my head, but it just feels like they have not been the same rush defense they've been in the last 2 years. And I am confident in Tennessee's ability to bounce back. And, one guy that's certainly going to be hungry next week is Dylan Sampson. It wasn't quite the Florida game. He had more than 0 touches, but he wasn't utilized that much against Missouri at all. So I would expect him to see maybe a little bit more workload next week and try to do a lot with it as, opportunities for the remainder of the season. Look, these guys only have 3 more games to play, so they know that.
For sure. Biggest moment of the game for you, Ryan Schumpert, was what?
Just the sequence right before the half where, as bad as Tennessee played, like you put it some on bad luck, and it is like kind of bad luck, coincidental, like odd, quirky. Quirky is how I describe it more than bad luck. Tennessee had the ball for 3 plays, so they went 3 and out, and Missouri got 5 straight third down conversions the next drive. Like, that wasn't unlucky. That was Tennessee's not being able to get Missouri in the third and long and not being able to get off the field on third and short and third and intermediate. But after all of that, they're staring down at the very least seemingly tying the game with a field goal before getting the ball to start the second half and potentially taking the lead. Like that's Tennessee was thoroughly outplayed, and you looked up with 2 minutes or so when Tennessee's on that drive, and it's like Tennessee has a great chance to not only take control of the game, but like add some distance here if they can put 2 good drives together. And they were putting one together. I'm still a little skeptical they score given how bad their red zone offense is, especially when they have to pass, which they would have given the time. But to do that, the fumble, and then for Missouri to basically surrender and say, we'll go into the locker room with a 3-point lead and to get gashed for a 35-yard run and give up, even after that, like Harrison Evans is a good kicker with a long range. Tennessee was playing like loose, soft coverage, giving Missouri 8 yards on a quick pass and then on a run again. And Evans they get well into his range and he knocks it through. So to me, that was the biggest sequence. And then I would just go on everything I just said about how bad Tennessee had played and had all those chances. Well, they just really messed up again for the 30 to make it 30 straight minutes of bad football. And they have the ball to open the second half, and you go score a touchdown. You're ahead, and you're very much in the game. And they go out, and Joe Milton rifles a rocket launcher at Jaylen Wright's gut on the speed option from 5 feet away. And obviously, it's not an offense that can overcome 2nd and 18.
No, and that's not something you would say a year ago, but definitely the case this year. Jack, was that the biggest moment in sequence for you, or is it something else?
Yeah, I think it's still the biggest moment. We'd be talking about it a lot more if the game was closer, just about how Tennessee, missed out on that 6-point swing there.
Yeah.
Obviously, Ryan, talked about it perfectly, but also just coming out at halftime and the quick 3 and out, and Missouri going down the field scoring. When Tennessee gets down 12 points in a second half, you just know that it's probably not going to end well. This team does not have the offensive firepower to be able to mount a comeback, and especially on the road, they really struggled to respond to adversity, and that showed again yesterday on Saturday against Missouri. So when Missouri scored to make it a 12-point game, I always go back to this feeling of when I knew whoever was going to win the game was going to win the game, and that was the time where I was like, okay, Tennessee's probably going to lose.
Well, it's also, for me, my biggest moment was, Heupel has now gotten way too conservative on punting. Now that he's found Jackson Ross is awesome, and Jackson Ross, you heard about him? Have you seen this? Jackson Ross, the Aussie punter? He's pretty good. He was really good in this game again. Here's the problem with that. He should not have been punting much yesterday because that defense could not get off the field, and you have to read the room a little bit where it's like, hey, you were a little bit too aggressive at the middle point of this season. Heupel made some choices deep in his own territory that I would not have agreed with. And I think we've talked about on this podcast where he was a little overzealous with some 4th down play calls, especially when the 4th down play calls were just runs up the middle that just have not worked all season long. But there is something where it's like I said in the group chat where I was like, you can't punt at the end of the third quarter like that. You're down 2 scores going into the 4th. Like, you can't do that. I understand you're still on your side of the field, but you need to be operating on the assumption that your defense is not going to get a stop. Like, there's no answer for Cody Schrader and Brady Cook at this point in time. Like, the linebackers have lost. The over the middle is going to be open the rest of this game. Elijah Herring and Caleb Perry and company could not, and Jeremiah Thielander and everybody else could not stay with them. Like, it was just, Elijah Herring was the lowest graded Vol. And if you watch the game, you saw that was evidently clear. That all has to be taken into account of like, all right, y'all, I understand Jackson's awesome and he can pin them up a little bit here, but here's the thing. They're going to drive down the field anyway. So you can pin them up at the 12, the 15. It's just going to take longer for us to get the ball back when we punt it. And you have to just I understand it's hard, but you should have lost faith in the defense early on in that game, that you didn't have the personnel that was going to be able to make plays to get you back in the game. The offense was going to have to carry the load. When you have 7 points at that point in time, what do you have to lose? Like, you're not winning the game no matter what when you're running the ball the way you are, when you're not able to stop anybody the way you are. I think it was kind of egregious to punt there because I think it was just a understanding that we can't win this football game. That was just waving the white flag to me, and it really annoyed me.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I would say that's the only punt, though, to me that was like a clearly bad call.
Yeah.
You kind of talked about it like there are implied there was multiple. The only other one that was debatable was the first drive, and that at that point probably would have been a little argue. I would have argued it was over aggressive if they hadn't gotten it. So
I would agree there.
Watching. But you're exactly right, and it's even worse. You said it was on their own side of the field. It was in Missouri's 38-yard line. Like,
yeah,
they were trotting. Obviously, I'm at home, so I can't see. I can tell they're running people on the field. I'm like, is that the field? Are they gonna try to field goal here? Like, surely they're not punting it, and they were punting it. So no, you're right. And at that point, it was obvious, and that was. And I know we always hit on them, and I have a couple other ones, but I'll do it now. You said one of your biggest takeaways from the game, and 24 hours later, one of them is that Heupel both punted and surrender field goals. I mean, you want to talk about a guy that was deflated and disappointed and beaten. I mean, to have a surrender punt, especially when the game's technically still in play, like it's a 2-possession game, on top of a surrender field goal it was pretty telling.
Man, Jack, I'm putting this to you first. Should there be firings after the season of any kind based on what we saw from this defense last week, from what we've seen from different position groups? Can Heupel sell running this exact staff back next year, or do you think we've seen enough at this point that you have, especially coming out of the Como game, that there have to be staff changes going into next year, year 4?
I mean, I hate I'm just not the guy that's like, fire this person, fire that person. That's just not who I am. Especially while there's still games to be played during the season. I don't know, it's just not something I really get into. But, I mean, you have seen quite a handful of defensive meltdowns on the road. And, South Carolina was the secondary. I think the linebacker play was the biggest reason for Missouri. So there's different areas to point to. Pass rush also struggled to get home again. So I don't want to put it on one position coach for all this, but it is an alarming trend of Tennessee's defense having a lack of discipline on the road and not being able to respond at all when they're getting punched in the mouth on the road. And it's just on the road. I want to emphasize that because the defense has been mostly pretty good at home throughout Tim Banks' tenure. So that's certainly an alarming trend. But again, I don't feel comfortable saying he just needs to go no matter what.
Isn't that funny, though, when people talk about Heupel on the road? I'm like, are y'all watching these games? Outside of what we saw yesterday, it's not the offense. It's really been all that much of them. Like, does Heupel's offense travel on the road? I don't think that's an issue. I mean, I understand that there's the crowd noise sometimes we see, but like by and large, I think you're going to struggle on the road at Georgia. You're going to struggle on the road at Alabama and a lot of those places, no matter what kind of offense you're running. The defense has not traveled on the road, to your point, Jack. And that's one that, I mean, again, we're entering year 3, but Ryan, for me, when it comes to the defense, and this is something I've been thinking about a lot over the last 24 hours, and I think I said in the group chat, where it's like, you look at who's on the field. I'm a big, like, players, blue chippers, they matter in a significant way. With all the problems Alabama's had, they're still one loss team that control their own playoff destiny, because I mean, there is something to be said about having 90% blue chippers on your roster that just figure it out, even when there are coaching limitations, because I still don't think it's a great coaching staff and one of the weakest of the Nick Saban era, and they still might stumble into the playoff and beat Georgia in the SEC title game, this, that, and the other. I think for me, what I struggle with is like a chicken and the egg thing. Is it just they still don't have anywhere near close of the kind of depth to be a good road defense to withstand a full year? Because these November meltdowns, if y'all recall, part of what's happening on this defense is Rutgers having to play. You're looking at some of these guys in the South Carolina game, in the South Carolina game a year ago, where Turnage is asked to play a big role. I mean, you lose Burrell early last year. If you look at the injuries to the secondary, to the linebackers this year, it's so hard for me to like be really, really upset, because I'm like, hey, like there's some real issues here, the zone stuff and just playing off these guys when they're just cooking you and not adapting, not really utilizing linebacker blitzes all that much. Aaron Beasley's kind of fallen out of in a major way, which I didn't see coming this year. He's been mostly forgettable the last few weeks. But look, like Keenan Pili looked like he was going to be the part, and Keenan Pili would have been really nice to have in this game against the Cody Schrader. Elijah Herring's just not a starting linebacker in this league. Like, he's just not. Like, is he a third or fourth guy? Sure. Is he a starter? No. And you look at this, Caleb Perry's on, Jeremiah Thielander is learning on the fly. Like, he's out there in major minutes. You lose Arian Carter for the year. You have Brandon Turnage, Warren Burrell. Like, you have a bunch of dudes out there that it's a bunch of 3-stars. Like, it's a bunch of guys who have been there for a while. They like the vets, but there's just not the kind of talent on that defensive side of the ball that's just going to carry over. And I just wonder how much of the issues is just that, like, Tennessee just doesn't have dudes yet. Like this last class, Ricky Gibson looks like he's going to be a good player. I like T-Lander. I like Aaron Carter. Hobbs is a good player. James Pierce is breaking out. But like you need a whole lot more because injuries happen every football season. And Tennessee has quietly been destroyed on the back end with injuries this year. And I think that has to be a factor in how you view what's happening here with this group. But it's also like you should have addressed it more. Like Gabe Judy-Lawley's really come into his own down the stretch. I think he's been solid on that opposite corner spot. But, I mean, losing Kamal Hadden, clearly a factor too the last few weeks. Like that was tough. Like we said, Peely being out for the year and that being your big linebacker placeholder for this group to let Arian and Jeremiah get ready. But I don't know. I think that's a fair argument. It doesn't absolve the coaching staff as a whole, but I do think it's something that has to be considered when you look at just who's playing meaningful snaps for Tennessee right now, Ryan.
Definitely. I would push back on that they've been destroyed by injuries. I mean, they've had some big
in the linebacker room.
They've had Keenan Peely's a big loss.
Yeah.
I'm still not. I mean, it's a big loss. I'm still not buying that he was going to be amazing. I mean, he might have been. We saw him play 20 snaps. It's hard for me to say. And Aaron Carter's tough. And Kamal Hadden's the big loss. But besides that, I mean, they've had some guys banged up and injured. But it's not like
Danico Slaughter only has played a little bit, and he's been in and out of the lineup. Warren Burrell been in and out of the lineup. Brandon Turner's been in and out of the lineup.
Yeah, but those guys aren't big losses. Like that's Danico Slaughter. If Kamal Hadden never gets hurt, is playing 10 snaps a game. And I do think that kind of goes back to your point, though. Like Tennessee's depth has improved defensively to the point where they can spell starters for 15, 20 snaps a game at these spots, and they're fine with that. But when those starters get hurt and these backups have to step in and play 50, 60 or 40, 50 snaps a game, that's where it is. They don't have the talent. And I think you're right. Like, I don't have an answer to your question. I think it's a very good one of how much of it is coaching, how much of it's just not having enough talent yet. And I think Tim Banks is, a fascinating debate on whether he'll come back, because he's had some really good games and really good performances, and also some really inexcusably bad ones. So that will be interesting. I will say, just as a whole, this offseason, and particularly December, January, is going to be fascinating, because I think you get in summer and you get into it, there's not going to be a ton of pressure on Heupel. Like, he's not going to enter next season on any sort of even warm seat, let alone hot seat. But this will be the first time where it's like real disappointment after a season. They're going to need to hit the portal harder than they've hit it. And, I'm kind of with Jack. I don't just point and see like there's just someone that's, you got to fire him. But there are very serious questions and musings about whether you need to make some moves on the defensive staff. So I think all that combines for what's going to be a really fascinating December and January. Obviously, we'll talk a lot more about it when we get there after these next two games, but it will be fascinating to see what happens.
Jack, what did you think coming into this game that was going to happen that did not come to fruition? What did you think in your preview when you're outlining how Mizzou would go? What did not happen that you were pretty confident was going to happen?
I did not think Cody Schrader would look like Barry Sanders against Tennessee. Let me put it that way to start. Look, Ray Davis entered the Kentucky-Tennessee game as the SEC's leader in rush yards. Tennessee held him to under 3 yards carry. And, Tennessee's rush defense has been so good in recent history. And I didn't expect them, I thought it was a possibility, but I didn't expect them to just completely shut him down. Yeah. But my goodness, did not expect over 300 yards from scrimmage. I can see how him getting open in the receiving game and, breaking a couple, getting a lot of yak is possible against this Tennessee defense with some porous play in the second and third level. But to have 200 yards rushing was very, very shocking. And then on the flip side, I just thought Tennessee would run the ball better too. Jaylen Wright had a 14-yard run. Outside of that, it was 6 carries for 8 yards. It was the worst game he's had this season. And I think Tennessee just kind of gets a little bit of a rut offensively when things aren't going their way and they don't really stick to the plan. I don't like their plan when things don't go their way early. But I expected Tennessee to run the ball better. I didn't expect Cody Schrader to have a huge career day like he did. So that was the biggest difference in the game.
And the worst part of the Schrader part of it was that, like, you just knew it was going to continue until the game was over. Like, there was no answer. Like, Tennessee had nothing they could do with that, where it's just like, what linebacker are you putting on him? What are you doing in the middle of this game to stop Schrader from absolutely eviscerating you? What linebacker is staying with Brady Cook on 3rd and long when he decides to run?
Yeah.
Who's doing it? Like, there was no answer. It was devastating. Just
the rush lanes
that
so bad.
Or Brady Cook just having 4 third-down conversions with his legs. To me, that's almost more deflating.
I'm just like immune to that now. Like, I just assume.
Yeah, that's more deflating, but it wasn't that surprising.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
Isn't that the worst indictment of the defensive staff, though, maybe? Is that we're not surprised. Like, 3rd and long is, hey, that's it. I'm actually surprised when you do get a stop from a quarterback run on 3rd and long with this Tennessee defense over the last 3 years. I think that might be a damning indictment, right?
Yeah, no, it definitely could be. And I mean, again, that's where Brady Cook's like, he's pretty mobile.
Yeah.
But it's been much more like get out of the pocket and make throws. That's where I just felt like some of their rush lanes were so bad when they would do stunts and the defensive tackle would not get out to be anywhere near. I mean, how many of those Brady Cook runs did he break towards one side and there was nobody in the vicinity?
Yeah.
Like, it was just easy runs. It wasn't like Matt Corral, who I actually went back and looked this up like maybe a month ago, did run for like 175 yards in that game. But at least those runs were like, oh my gosh, Matt Corral! How in the world did he get out of that? Or that was a great design by Kiffin to block the spy with the center on the play. Like those, it was just everything was easy for Brady Cook scrambling in that game. And that, again, I don't think necessarily was that shocking, but that was maybe something that was a little bit different about it, which is how bad I thought Tennessee's rush lanes were.
The best and worst from Josh Heupel this week. If you had to go positive, I know it's a little bit harder this week, but Jack, what was the best thing you saw from him in this team this week, and what was the worst thing you saw from Heupel?
As in a certain play?
Certain play, certain decision, certain call. We've talked about punts, different things. What would you say is the best thing he did in a positive way first, then the worst?
Well, the worst, I just don't like the giving up towards the end, the punt, and honestly, the field goal it makes me very angry watching that as just a fan of football. Like, why are you kicking the field goal? I just don't get it. And it goes back to the timeout at the end of Florida. I don't know what Heupel's doing here at the end of games. It's a little weird, but that was certainly my least favorite of Heupel. It's easy to go back to this play because their only touchdown, but I really liked, the play call to get Dante Thornton one-on-one and just throw it deep on long and send a message early. And I like that play. And they audibled, I'm pretty sure, to have Squirrel run a more shallow cross, and he brought the safety down. It was bang, bang. It was easy, and Dante won the battle. So that's what I go to first. But, not a whole lot of positive when you only score 7 points and he's an offensive coach. So you're kind of limited to what you can do.
Yeah. What do you think, Ryan?
I'll add one last thing. Bad runs on 2nd and long. Don't get it. That's my big thing too.
Yeah. Runs in general yesterday.
Both of mine are like directly tied to Jack's. I'll say my good was the Dante Thornton bet. Like, he, after the Alabama game, at least myself, I think a lot of people were like, all right, he'll be done for the season. And Josh Heupel bet on Dante Thornton and said, no, we're going to force you to play more. You have the talent that Caleb Webb and Chaz Nimrod don't, and we need in the receiver room. And obviously he gets hurt on that play, which is the unfortunate part of it. But he had obviously played well against Kentucky, and then hauling a big pass it felt like, all right, that gamble, that decision by Josh Heupel, which obviously was made 3 weeks ago, and his coaching staff worked. The negative, not necessarily specifically to surrender, punt, and kick, but just, again, 3 losses in 3 games on the road where things have gone bad for Tennessee, and their team has completely shut down, completely crumbled, no sort of resiliency, cannot respond to adversity at all. Like, that's a bad sign. And now in 2 of these 3 games, I don't mean to be an old man loser, but in two of these 3 games, you have the Tennessee team more revved up to try to fight the other team when the game's over than they were to play at all when something's gone bad. Like, that's, again, maybe this is an old man taking me, but that's embarrassing. Like, that happening twice, and in all 3 of your losses, you get hit with adversity and you absolutely crumble. And then in 2 of those, you're trying to fight the other team in the final 10 seconds, getting your absolute butt whooped against a horrible Florida team. And this Missouri team's good. Obviously, I don't mean to disrespect this specific Missouri team, but the University of Missouri football program that's embarrassing, and that's to me, I guess, a lot of bad from Josh Heupel in Tennessee in that game. That is my lasting image when you want to talk about the program as a whole.
Yeah, I think that's more than fair. We haven't mentioned Joe Milton in 34 minutes here. 7 points. He's number 7.
Mickey Mantle. 7 Costanza.
The 7 Costanza. Oh, I love that. It's a great name. Future name if anyone wants to use it.
Name.
It's a great
Soda
name.
too. If anyone wants to use soda. Good for a boy and a girl.
No, I'm just thinking about that whole episode. No, I think what's interesting is like he's kind of in good graces all across the board. Wouldn't y'all say from Tennessee fans that like most people have settled in on Joe?
Yeah.
But 7 points is 7 points. And there is a difference between like, hey, things aren't going well. You had the bomb to Dante Thornton, but like some of the things that Brady Cook was doing, Joe was not doing. And this was something that annoyed me in this game was that I thought he was kind of making the turn a little bit, rushing the football. He was not good running the ball and just turning something from nothing into something with the ball in his hands when stuff wasn't open downfield, when they were really thin at wide receiver. Having a mobile quarterback is just so important for so many teams in the sport now. And you're always, it just seems like it's only getting harder and harder to have just a statue back there. But like, I think this was another one of those games where things were not going right. Jaylen Wright and Dylan Sampson and Jabari Small were not running the football well. This is where you need a Jaden Daniels guy to take off, to turn something from nothing. And I understand everybody can't have that. But this was something, if I was to, and this feels almost like nitpicking, but I think this was one of those games where Joe couldn't bail you out in other ways, where an elite quarterback would have been able to scramble, to do other stuff to keep your team in it, to sustain drives go longer. I mean, there was that weird, as we talked about, the pitch play that was a fumble. He had the bad thing where it wasn't really his fault, where Dylan Sampson was just right there, and that was a fumble. I don't think that you can pin that on Joe. I think you can throw the pick 6 on Joe, but I don't think it really mattered at that point in the game. He's just pressing and just trying to make something out of nothing. I don't really hate that all that much. I just wonder, this is where it's like he's a game manager, where things get down big, and he's not a quarterback who is going to bring you back from 2 scores on the road. Like, I think that was something that was very evident in this one. Is that fair to just say he's not that guy? He can only play from a lead?
Yeah, no, I feel like that should have been common knowledge going into this game. That's just who Joe Milton is. He's not a game changer. He's not going to put the team on his back. And that's what he's a big reason why I say when Tennessee goes down 12 points in the second half, they can't win because they don't have a quarterback that can get it done. And that's not a great thing, but you've seen how they can get it done with Joe. So everything has to kind of click around him for it to work. He's just limited. That's the facts.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's, you guys both said comments that completely tie into one another. Where Jack, you said, I think most people know that by now that he is. And that's why, Chase, you said why, it doesn't seem like anybody's upset with Joe in his performance. That's why, I think everybody knows that Joe's a game manager. That's who Joe is. I think everybody's been happier that Joe's played like a good game manager the last few weeks as opposed to just a bad quarterback that you have to call a game manager because you can't do anything and they just want him to manage the game, which is what he was early in the season. But no, that's who Joe is. And the things around Joe did not put them in position to win. And Joe's not someone that's going to pick up the team and carry them to a win when the things around him aren't in, opportune spots.
Yeah, it's not like Matt Corral, like you said in Neyland 2 years ago, where he's just putting the team on his back, rushing for nearly 200 yards, getting killed in the backfield, just getting up over and over again.
Yeah.
Joe's not that guy. Like, you get blanked in the second half against Alabama. You had the lead, things start to unravel, and he just can't stop them. He can't overcome that kind of adversity on the football field. And I think at this point, you just kind of have to chalk that up. And to bring it all home here as we wrap up, Georgia's coming down. The thing, if you're a Tennessee fan, I think you probably feel the best about. Brock Bowers played in the Auburn game at Auburn. Auburn at that point in time in the Plains was atrocious offensively. They weren't able to do anything with a passing game against Georgia, and they were still up for the majority of that game. It took a really strong fourth quarter, second half effort from Brock Bowers and company for Georgia to pull that out. Neyland will be rocking harder than what it was on the Plains 2 months ago. I understand Georgia's playing really good ball. They're coming off a big win over Ole Miss now. But I think that's something to keep in mind that Georgia's 3-6-1 against the spread this year. They did not cover at Vanderbilt. They did not cover at Auburn. I think if you're the most optimistic Tennessee fan, you look at, I mean, hey, you were up after the first quarter 2 years ago at home. You did some stuff to surprise Georgia. You had them on the fence, on the ropes, really, the first half. Kirby made adjustments. You get blasted in the second half. It is what it is. I think if you're a Tennessee fan, you look at all of those things. You look at how Auburn played Georgia at home. You know how Heupel and this group is at home. Your last big game of the year. This is it, because you're going to be in like the Citrus Bowl or whatever after this one, and then you get Vanderbilt.
You're going to be in the Citrus Bowl.
Well, yeah, like whatever it is, it's not something you're going to get up for. You're playing Iowa or Rutgers potentially come December. So this is it for a lot of seniors, COVID guys like this. There's a lot of optimism on that front. I think the most optimistic view is that I do think they're probably going to cover. I don't think they get blasted at home and blown out in this final big home game, but maybe I'm too optimistic about that point. But I think that is probably where I'm leaning, is that they do cover a 10-point spread right now. What say you, Jack? Are you that optimistic after everything we just saw over the weekend?
I mean, I don't know. That's a close game if they cover 10. I think that's a major win for Tennessee if they can keep it close with Georgia next weekend, considering how the Bulldogs looked against Ole Miss. I don't really know. I'm non-committal right now on a Sunday, but yeah, I don't see why they can't. I think they're certainly capable of covering 10 points. I do think they will keep it competitive for a little bit. Maybe not the whole game, but at least for a good chunk of it. They will not get blown out at home. Just won't happen.
Mm-hmm.
But, I think they cover 15. I'll put it that way. Maybe I'm more confident they cover 10 by Thursday.
That's fair.
Yeah, I'm kind of like Jack where I say it's hard to say for sure. Between the Georgia not being good against the spread and everyone in the whole entire universe saying hammer Georgia, that, these guys are pretty smart. They don't have all those big buildings in Las Vegas losing money. That kind of makes me think Tennessee will cover. But the one thing I will say, just going back to your point, you kept on pointing out the Auburn game, which, I mean, I get it's the most radical example. I think Georgia's a lot better team than they were 2 months ago. Like, you're just seeing it. Josh Allen talks about it all the time. Like, you have to get better over the course of the season. I think Georgia's – that's why I thought Tennessee would be better. Even though Tennessee, I think, at least before yesterday, we would have said Tennessee's done a lot of getting better over the season too. But why I thought maybe this game would be better for them to play early in the season when Georgia's still trying to figure some things out and has a new quarterback. But to me, Carson Beck's getting better. Their offense is a lot better than it was early in the year. And even I think their defense is starting to look more like a traditional Georgia defense than the one that was still good and probably still really good, but looked like it had definitely taken a somewhat sizable step back going into the year.
I also think it will end up helping. When we talk about where it's like having nothing to play for and no stakes for Georgia, I think helps Tennessee in this matchup. Georgia locking it up, guaranteed date with Alabama no matter what, no losses. I think that actually sets up Tennessee better than it would have been if it was a battle for the East, because you are looking at a situation where Georgia walks in, they're like, absolutely not. We're not. This is now our Super Bowl like last year, and you're going to get dunked on at home. And I don't think that's going to be the case because of the circumstance. I think that it sucks that you won't go to the East again, but whatever. This team was never going to make it through the gauntlet. But I think it actually will be in Tennessee's favor that there's no stakes in this game.
Oh, there's no question. They have nothing to lose. And as I said earlier, in college football, that means a lot. And I thought the line I was surprised by the line, but when I saw the line, I was like, okay, the books obviously feel like Tennessee is going to continue with the trend that happens in college football, that, hey, back against the wall, play really hard. Teams coming off a big win, doesn't really mean much for them. Maybe they play a little lackadaisical. So I feel like the wonk move, like the betting expert move, would be to pick Tennessee to cover based on all those things.
Yeah, and it's also like it's not, and I don't know, this is so deep in the psyche of it, maybe this wouldn't matter at all, but it's not like this is one of those years where Georgia would no doubt not get in or get in with one loss. I mean, like, it's if they win this game and they lose to Alabama, like, it's possible they get in, but it's not definitive. And at the same time, like, if they lose this game and they beat Alabama, like, they're definitively going to go be in. Like, the Alabama game, obviously it's more important, but just like a loss / a win in the Alabama game is going to carry way, way more weight for Georgia than this one is. So even past it, just not feeling like a big game and not being for the East and Tennessee looking worse, like, it's everything points to this one not meaning a ton for Georgia, besides the fact that this is, I think, the game they can get to the record for longest SEC win streak ever. But I don't know if that's really something that's super motivating.
Yeah. Well, Ryan, what can the good folks check out from you and the team over at Rocky Top Insider this week?
I put a tweet out yesterday and then also put it in my takeaways article. We always have like a more from RTI and always just do the same sport and just like basically the name of the title. But I put it in there yesterday. Maybe it's basketball time in Tennessee.
Yes, it is.
So they look good. Plenty of stuff from, obviously I was in Madison covering it and then jumped on the football side of it, and Jack and Rick were holding it all down in Columbia. So we have plenty of good stuff from the fallout of Tennessee, Missouri, and the debacle of the performance. And we take a look at, I'm sure we'll have tons of stuff all week and a look at Georgia and trying to see how this Tennessee team will bounce back. So a lot of typical in-season football stuff and a lot of basketball stuff as excitement gets revved up for Rick Barnes' ninth Tennessee team.
I mean, I'm already struggling with my Zakai can't play over Gainey in crunch time take. Like, I think Zakai is not one of your 5 best, and I don't know if that happens this year. I love Zakai to death. My early take, Dalton Connect, closer, but Jordan Gainey, best shot on the team. Best. I'm all in on the Jordan Gainey stuff. The jumpers.
Jordan, you asked Chase. I was gonna say June. You asked Chase in September about Jordan Gainey, and he said you can't have him on the court for more than 5 minutes a game.
No, I'm all in.
Chase is very lucky. Our Tennessee basketball conversation last week was off air.
I don't know what you mean.
Because he had some.
I don't know what you're saying. No.
He had some cold takes to argue to rival Josh Heupel coaching decisions in Missouri this weekend.
Oh, wow. Well, no, we're not doing it. Jack Foster, what about you and the team over at Always College Football?
Yeah, normal Sunday reaction drop today. Reacting to a great Week 11. We got the Tuesday night instant college football playoff reaction show that's been dropping. That's been a whole lot of fun. Greg's was super fired up last week. I don't know if you guys saw him on the actual ESPN show, but he was super fired up and probably a pretty cool guest coming on Tuesday night as well. So just continuing to, the grind of college football season. Doesn't get any better than this.
There it goes. It doesn't get any better than this, but it's basketball time in Tennessee and baseball here before you know.
I'm out. I'm fine with college basketball. Like, yeah, I'll watch the Tennessee games, but it's not basketball time yet. Like, I'm still complete football brain until it's over.
Oh, I'm absolutely checked out emotionally from this Tennessee football team. I can't handle it anymore. I want to put this all to bed.
And the Falcons lost the Cardinals today. So
well, hold on. Knew how that was going. It was still taping on my other screen. So we're taping this at the end of that game. So thank you, Jack Foster, for going ahead and wrapping up how that one went down because that was still on the back burner for later on this evening. But thankfully, Jack Foster's here to ensure that I did not waste the last 30 minutes of my night. So shout out to Jack on that front. No spoilers.
I didn't know. My bad.
No, it's okay. It's fine.
What do you expect? Kyler came back. I mean, your hands are tied.
All right, I don't want to talk any Falcons or Tennessee football anymore. I'm ready to put both to bed for the rest of this year. It's basketball season, like we said, and baseball season will be here before you know it. I just want to flush both. Flush them both. I can't handle it anymore. No more. Tired of the winning. It's not that. It's tired of the losing. I can't handle any more losing. No more. It's not fun. It's the longest sport. 7 hours of these games, and it's 7 hours of torture. No, can't do it. No more losing.
Well, Jack saved you 30 minutes.
He did. Jack did ultimately save me there, so I do appreciate that.
More tapes, Chase.
Thank you. Yep. I appreciate that, Jack. Jack Foster, Ryan Schumpert, always a pleasure. Talk to y'all soon.